Abhay, and thank you so much for joining us today here. The Alphabets of Africa, behind this beautiful cover,
Thank you.
is a collection of poetry inspired by Africa, and it covers a huge repertoire of time and space. What drew you to this subject?
Well, I was fascinated by Africa's contribution in shaping our modern world, which is often overlooked. And there are very few books I really came across which could truly tell me the story of Africa. And I mean, as human beings, as a species, I realized that we are all Africans because humanity originates in Africa. And then we migrate to the rest of the world from the continent of our birth. And I thought that also depiction of Africa as in Conrad's Heart of Darkness, is completely unfair, and wanted to also highlight Africa's role in bringing light to humanity, how it has shaped us as a civilization, as a species which has now taken over the rest of the planet.
And Africa itself, of course, there's even a phrase online of Africa is not a country. Africa is a continent, and an incredibly diverse one. Right. And you range far and wide across this continent. Tell us something about that great diversity and difference you find there.
Well, so for example, one of the first poems which came to my mind was this poem called "Africa is Everywhere," and I tried to pen it in, from the ruins of Carthage to flourishing Cape Town, from the forlorn library of Timbuktu to the bustling old stone town of Zanzibar, from the great pyramids of Giza to the forts of the old Zimbabwe, from the temple ruins of Luxor to the great cities of Nairobi and Accra, from the stone circles of Senegambia to the Ruwa of Madagascar, from Mauritania's Richat structure to the 7 earths in Mauritius. Africa is one as the earth, one as the ocean, one as the sky.
Wow. Thank you for getting a reading as well. This is so wonderful. And there's also, the poems are organized, so as the title implies, like an alphabet. So you go through kind of A, B, C, and different subjects under that. And one thing that really struck me is that some of them, they're about many different aspects of Africa, but there's some personalities in there that you've really picked out. And I found that very interesting. Sort of, how did you pick the characters that you spoke about?
So for example, one of the great historical figures we have from Africa, actually from Mali, is the great emperor Mansa Musa. And in fact, he is considered to be the richest emperor ever alive on this planet because of his control of the gold mines. You have, people like, several queens, whom we are completely unfamiliar with, but have played a great role in history. For example, Queen Ninga, from the great central, from Congo. So you have so many characters, inhabiting these spaces, which we are not really familiar with. Ethiopia, for example, the capital of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa itself, was founded by its queen, and she's an amazing character, in Ethiopia's history. But nobody really knows her outside Africa. So I came across the Augustine of Hippo, who is considered to be a central figure in Christianity, development of Christianity. Or, for example, the modern figures like Abdul Razak Gurna, who has been to this festival 2 years ago. But they are, there are so many of the great people who inhabit these spaces. For example, when we stop at the traffic light, for example, you see outside the traffic lights, the signals, red, green, and
amber.
Yeah. So that's an invention by an American African. So all these, I would like to. There's Toni Morrison, of course, here. Nelson Mandela. They are well-known figures. But we also have someone called Osman Sembon, who is considered the father of African cinema. So many of the pharaohs, Egyptian pharaohs, we know about Ramses the Great or other emperors, but we also have many pharaohs from Sudan. Modern Sudan, but old kingdom of Kush, and like for example Pianki or and so on. So I think these are some very interesting figures who inhabit these spaces.
I've got one more question for you before I open it to the audience and we take any questions they would like. I found it fascinating, you're writing this as a diplomat from India, somebody who obviously has reached out into the world a lot and traveled a lot. Did you write this with a sense that actually in India you would like to start more of a conversation? Now, India and Africa, of course, both have colonial histories. They have some things in common there, but very different colonial histories, much happening. Do you see a real future for a cultural and positive connection there?
Certainly. In fact, there's a central figure, African figure. His name is, you might have heard, Malik Ambar. And Malik Ambar is actually an Abyssinian slave who is brought to India and becomes the de facto ruler of Ahmednagar Sultanate. And he's actually the arch enemy of the Mughal Emperor Jahangir. And Jahangir commissions a painting where he's shooting an arrow in his head, And in fact, a very interesting history. Shivaji's grandfather, Maloji Bhosle, is actually a general of Malik Ambar.
Wow.
And how Malik Ambar's, Ambar, shapes actually Maratha military history. So there are amazing examples. There is this, the national, motto of Kenya, for example, is called Harambee, if you have heard of it. But Harambee actually comes from, the Indian coolies or laborers who went to Kenya, and when they were pulling things, they used to call Har Ambe, Har Ambe. And later on, this becomes a national motto of Kenya, and it's known as Harambee. And now Harambee events happen very regularly in Kenya to put together resources to help somebody. And it's called pulling together, and it's known as Harambee. So there's so many other cultural threads. Of course, Mahatma Gandhi, he became, he was Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi when he went to Africa, actually. But when he came out, he was Mahatma Gandhi.
Yeah.
So India, Africa share, lots of cultural threads, and I think, we need to, in India particularly, we need to know more about our Africa connection. And as a humanity, too, everywhere we need to understand this, that our stories as a species begins there. Yeah. We are all Africans.
Yeah. I'd love to ask any questions from the audience. Anybody who would like to ask about this, just put your hand up and we can send something. This gentleman at the front here.
Check. Hello. Hi, good evening, everyone. So my question is from a diplomatic perspective. As a young Indian, apart from the connections that we have, and we just talked about it, with Africa, why is it important for us to know more about Africa And how is this related to the modern world and geopolitics, if you can elaborate on that a little bit?
I think it's very important to understand Africa, to know more about it, to know ourselves. Because, Africa has played a significant role in, shaping our world, which we are mostly unaware of. I gave you some examples of, for example, Maratha history, military history, role of Malik Ambar in shaping Indian history particularly. But there are so many other examples where Africa has, shaped our world. And not only that, if you look back in time, we actually, our species comes from Africa. So ultimately, going back to Africa will truly help us to understand ourselves. In India particularly, I also gave you example of Mahatma Gandhi, how he went to Africa as Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi as a lawyer, but he comes back, to us as a Mahatma. There's so many other examples, but please do read the book. There are 180 poems here, and they are dedicated to the great personalities, monuments. It also includes poems. Those who are familiar with poetry know the poem Ozymandias by P.B. Shelley, and here is a response to him. In this book, the poem is about the pharaoh Ramses the Great, and I have given a poetic response to his poem. So I think it's a book worth reading to get to know more about Africa.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anyone with their hand up? This gentleman just here?
Yeah.
Abhay, I'm curious to know what you've written your book previously about the alphabets of Latin America and so on. I'm curious to know what did you find in your travels in Africa and in your readings in Africa that different from
Latin America,
what you saw in Latin America or what you see in India, or are we talking about a common humanity that with different names of heroes and so on?
Well, so first of all, Africa is much more complex. It's Latin America is much simpler that way if you compare it to Africa. Even in terms of modern nation states, Africa consists of 55 of them. But Africa is different in the sense that it's Mother Africa. If you look at the oldest temple in the world today, it is still, exists there in Luxor. So anything, I was trying to read a poem which was written in 2000 BCE, by some Egyptian poet. So everything, you really, the first diplomatic treaty between, that exists. It exists between the Ramses the Great and the Hittite ruler. So anything we look at, if you look at the first diplomatic correspondence, it's Amarna letters, So anything, we can really go back to Africa. You look at Carthage, for example, or even actually Europe. It gets its name from Europa, the princes, Phoenician princes, So Africa is, in a way, mother to all of us, to all the civilizations. And Africa has many, hidden secrets which we don't know, or which we do not want to know. So this is a book which is, for the first time, tries to bring Africa to light, and light to us, to humanity, through poems.
Thank you. Any more questions? We've got time for maybe one or two more, but if not, we could have a reading.
So I can read a poem called, the poem is called Ramses the Great. It's a response to Ozymandias.
Let's have that.
So everybody knows this poem. My name is Ozymandias, king of kings. Look on my works, Ye mighty and despair, nothing beside remains round the decay of that colossal unrake, boundless and bare. The lone and level sands stretch far away. That's P.B. Shelley's Ozymandias. It's a very famous poem. And here is a poem called Ramses the Great. I am the greatest pharaoh of all time. My reign glorious and sublime, a restless warrior battling Hittites and Nubians, the sea pirates of Sheridan, Syrians and Libyans. I gifted the world its first peace treaty, a path to live with honor and dignity. I have survived the ravages of time. Along the Nile banks lies my colossus prime. To see my mummy, people from distant lands flock. I am eternal, indifferent to time's ticking clock. My monumental edifices, gigantic and tender, come now, behold my beauty and splendor. Don't despair. Listen to my immortal voice. Across the vast stretches of sand, and rejoice.
Thank you. Yes, I think we should have applause. It's very interesting. So you're responding to Shelley's poem, famously, is about the sort of vaingloriousness of building monuments to yourself that then collapse. You've seen it from a completely different angle. You see it as actually he's endured.
Exactly. So you go back to Egypt today, and you will see that Ramses the Great is still alive. I mean, he's not only alive, but his presence is felt everywhere and he kind of stands as a symbol of the glory of the ancient Egypt. So Shelley is looking from a different angle. He's looking at the absurdity of power and splendor, but I am seeing it as something which survives.
Oh, would that we all had monuments thousands of years
Right.
after our death. Yes, it's quite amazing.
And I just wanted to end it by a poem called Africa is Everywhere. And it's light spires to pierce through the darkness of hatred and ignorance. Learn about Africa, her rich heritage and traditions, music and dance, colors and cuisine. Don't burn in the hellfire of ignorance, screaming the horror, the horror. There is beauty and wonder, awaiting to startle. Open your eyes, heart and mind. Africa is everywhere. Africa has everything you can dream of. It has the power and magic to lead you out of the long, deep tunnel of darkness into light. Come, shade your ignorance, bask in the light of Africa.
So there we have it, really a passionate plea for actually a completely different attitude than some of the negative ones we've seen in the past. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
True, and I was truly astounded while writing this book to discover so many aspects of Africa which is so little known across the rest of the world. And I think it's an opportunity for each one of us to discover more about the continent which has given birth to our species and nourished it to be able to populate the rest of the world. Today we might see Africa as, as a place which is far away from our imaginations, and we are busy building borders and barriers to prevent migration. But we must understand this, that we ourselves, each one of us, are actually Africans.
We all made that journey. Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much. Sure. Yeah, why not? We'll have another poem if we're here.
Yes, so it could be, so here is also, if you have, if you know about the Berlin Conference, for example, which is a major part of African history. And here is a very short poem on Berlin conference in this book. And this is, I think, worth a read, is Berlin Conference. Africa carved and devoured. That's it.
I mean, that pretty much sums it up.
And I think, I would like to read a poem about, maybe anything who comes to your mind while thinking about Africa? Sorry? Nelson Mandela. So there's in this book there's a homage to Nelson Mandela as well. And here, maybe we end it with a poem on Nelson Mandela, who has inspired so many people across the world, and who himself was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi.
Yes.
So here is a poem called Mandela, I think.
See if we can find it. Hold on.
I think
I might have it in this one.
Nelson Mandela. Can you find his
You lifted it out.
in the
Or is it under?
Nelson? Is it 153?
153.
Yeah.
There we go. I don't think
So 1964, I rose with the resolve to fight apartheid, to end the white supremacy, devoting my life to the struggle of my people, fighting against domination, white or black. An ideal I lived for, an ideal I was ready to die for. 1990. Imprisoned for 27 years, I was finally released. They could not hold me any longer. I walked out of the prison holding my wife's hand, living behind the bars, hatred and bitterness, certain I must have been long forgotten. Yet, when I raised my right fist with a smile on my face, delirious crowds erupted in roars. I felt a sudden surge of courage in my heart, infusing new hope. 1994, world assembled in Pretoria to witness my swearing in as the first black president of South Africa. Joining the celebrations in the street, I spoke, "The sun will never set on so glorious a human achievement." 1995. At the Rugby World Cup final, I stepped onto the field wearing South African colors. The all-white crowd chanted in unison, "Nelson, Nelson, Nelson." How blessed I felt, witnessing this momentous occasion of racial reconciliation. A moment etched forever in Invictus, 2010, Frail and sick, I managed to smile, waving at the crowd at the finals of the Soccer World Cup, bidding my final goodbye to one and all on our fragile planet. That's it. Thank you. But there is also a poem about Nadine Gordimer, the Nobel laureate from South Africa. And what an amazing writer and personality. You know. So anybody you can think of Africa, there's a poem here. Please do pick up the book and read. You will thank me later.
Will you be signing copies for the...
I'll be happy to sign copies for you. I think they have kept it there in the background. So look forward to see you there. Thank you.